Today we talk about superheroes. Frank, there's been a mistake.
Oh no, what's going on, Charles?
Something's happened with the time hole wormhole continuum thing.
What are you talking about?
We've done this before.
Oh, we talked about superheroes before because it was one of our more popular videos that still gets a lot of views, and also our sponsor really fits in well with it.
I don't believe you.
Okay, so welcome to What is Tabletop, where I, Frank, am the sane one, and with me is Charles.
Beware. Beware of the groove.
Look, Lex Luthor's not behind this. I think we could say Lex Luthor. He's not copywritten. He probably is copywritten, but not in that sense. Anyway, we're here to talk about superhero RPGs. Now, you may be saying, Frank, you're not talking about my favorite superhero RPG. That's probably because we already talked about it in another video. And this video is a sequel because so many people got mad at us for not talking about the one they enjoyed.
Yeah, sequels are the best.
Yeah, Marvel's never let us down with a sequel.
I can't think of one bad sequel.
Nope.
Not one comes to mind.
I think there was a joke in Screen, too, where they were talking about sequels are always worse than the original, which is, like, not true. But
I can't think of a single terrible sequel, prequel, trilogy. They're all good.
let us know in the comments that Charles is wrong. Anyway, so we're going to be going through a few different ones. Again, check out our other video if you think we were talking about one that we haven't talked about yet, but we have talked about it. Anyway, Charles, what's the first one we're going to talk about?
We're going to talk about Cypher System.
Yeah, for all the 2 people who still play Cypher System. Do you even know what the Cypher System is?
I know it's a book right here.
Yeah. So it's a generic RPG system that has various amounts of settings. Like, I remember seeing an ad for like all 12 settings it had. And I was like, that looks really cool aesthetically. But the money is a little much. So I'm not going to pick it up yet one day. So basically, Cypher System is a system where the GM doesn't roll, but it's still a D20 system. Numenera is probably, I think, its most well-known system, but there is several superhero systems in Cypher.
Ooh.
And people brought up, like, how dare you not talk about Cypher System? How dare you not talk about this and that? And here's the thing. We're not going to go into too much detail in any one system because partially we want you to play it for yourselves, partially because we have too many systems to cover and we only have so much time. Charles has kids.
They're starving as we speak.
Yes, Oliver Twist over here. And good old Oliver Twist character.
Good old Oliver Twist.
But basically, we're going to talk about like one thing each. Like one part that we like about the system, and just kind of focus on it. And so with Cypher System, like we said, a lot of it is like different campaign settings. But what's nice is there's 3 different superhero ones, and each of them kind of has their own unique flair to it.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what are the flares?
So there's Claim the Sky, The Origin, and Unmasked. So Claim the Sky is more of your traditional like MCU type superhero. So like they don't really have secret identities. They kind of just fly around, do really cool things out in the open. They got cool costumes, stuff like that. So this is more of your traditional like punch a bad guy, do really cool things, stop the bad guy from doing bad guy stuff.
So like the golden era of comics type things.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course afterwards you got The Origin, which is more like realistic and gritty and like, you know, DC-esque in the sense of like the Snyderverse movies where it's like much more grounded and realistic in that regard. And it's got some cool stuff there. And then the final one is Unmasked, which if you know anything about another superhero RPG, it's very much just like teens learning to become themselves, but set in the 80s this time.
Ooh, 80s. So there's lots of synth guitars and keyboards and stuff.
Yeah, so basically each book is going to come with obviously the rules, but then also a campaign that you can run in if you choose to, and all of them are set in accordance with that tone. But I think that's a really cool option. I think a lot of the times you get these superhero games that kind of just fit one mold, instead of allowing you to kind of, you know, be flexible. And obviously as a generic RPG system, I think that's a really good idea that the Cypher System allows you to be able to do that.
So it's really cool how they do that because, you know, for being a generic system, if you're really into superheroes, like, hey, we have 3 systems for you to use. You know, pick which one best is suited for your campaign, your adventure. So yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, and then again, what I always like is when you can have a generic system and then you have specific settings, but then you can have mechanics that are tied in specifically with just that. So you can have your default system that anyone can use, and then as certain mechanics come up, because obviously being in a more realistic grounded setting versus a like MCU setting, you're going to have some mechanics that are going to be different, right? You're going to have probably more focused on like survival and stuff like that, and the
Right.
more gritty setting, versus also with even like a 80s teen movie where it's like more focused on like figuring out who you are and learning that space.
The power of friendship.
Indeed. Yeah, and then obviously the Cypher system itself, there's a lot of videos on it. If you ever want us to do a video on Cypher, let us know. But the big draw is the GM never rolls. There's a set like DC always, I think it's 9, that you always have to roll for, and then you can do certain things and spend certain points to like adjust the DC. Like if it's more difficult, it now becomes an 11. If it's you never have modifiers is the big thing.
Okay.
Instead, it just adjusts the level of difficulty on the roll or check you're trying to make, which is, I think, a really interesting way to do it. I mean, it's the same thing mechanically, like from a math standpoint, it's the same thing, but the feel of it is a little bit more different, which is cool.
And the difficulties, is that determined by the GM, or do they have like a system?
No. 9 is the set difficulty.
Okay, got it.
And then depending on the circumstances, right, it could increase or decrease depending on certain traits that are evolved, certain skills that are evolved, stuff like that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like
But
that.
yeah, that is the Cypher system. There's another generic system we'll get to in a moment. So don't at me, Savage Goose.
So the next one we're going to talk about, my favorite, Indominant.
Is it your favorite because you played it?
Yes.
We don't have a clear and obvious bias here.
I love you, Zarek.
Okay, so Indominant is a fun one. What it's trying to do is capture more of the grounded superhero game. They want a more emphasis on strategy and tactics than they do on just being able to do really cool and powerful stuff. Though you can still do some really cool and powerful stuff, as our one-shot shows, which, by the way, you can go check out the one-shot. It's live right now.
Yeah. I also love you too, Ricky. Had to throw
That was your one statement you're going to make? You don't have any additional things to talk about?
No. Indominant's great. I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. I think one of my favorite things about it is the flexibility or the customization of the characters.
I think that it's interesting the way they do customization, because I think a lot of times in these games it's like, okay, what power are you? And that's kind of your like locked in
Like your
thing.
base. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's your,
Versus like Indominant, where it's like, okay, no, pick your play type, your archetype, basically. Like, are you a healer, which is the arbiter? Are you a blaster? Are you a guardian? Like, what's your play style? And then on top of that, you have these special like powers, like martial arts, which is what you chose, or light magic, which is what Brooke chose, or fire, which no one should be surprised that Dunkerton chose fire, because that guy has a problem.
he's an arsonist.
But like, that's the cool thing, is that like you can have multiple people with the same power, but then their playstyles are going to be a little bit different, which is a really cool thing. To me, I think what's most interesting is their dominance and weakness mechanic. I think to me that's like the unique part about it that I like.
That is a very cool thing too. It's because it kind of plays a little bit like advantage and disadvantage, but it's just different enough where it's like this is unique in and of itself. So
for those of you who don't know, the way it works in Indominant is that basically whenever you have a moment of dominance, or an ability that gives you dominance, or you're in a situation where you're more dominant, you add a point of dominant. But it's not like advantage in 5th edition where you just roll a d20. In this one, you only roll an additional d4 and add it to you add it to the roll, which is a little different. Now, as you keep adding stacks, you increase the die size. So you could eventually, if you had enough dominance, roll 2 d20s and add them together.
yeah, because it stacks, which is really, again, that's I think what makes it really unique, because in those other RPGs like Smudges and Smaggins, you can't stack your
Right.
Or not supposed to, at least. So.
No, right. The rules state that they just eventually cancel out. Well, and then what's interesting too is the weakness is the inverse of that, where you're rolling and subtracting the result. And so there is this very interesting back and forth of like, well, we want to have dominance. Oh, but we're in a situation where it gives us weakness. And in the one shot, you see me just give somebody a additional dominance because the situation allowed for it, which is a really fun way to do it. Now, the big thing on top of that is the reason you want to be rolling with dominance is because if you roll a nat 20, it's a crit. But when you roll with dominance, if you roll a 20 or higher when the two dice are added together, then it's considered a critical success as well. And so obviously you want more dominance because then you'll be critting a lot more, thus being able to do more damage and having more fun, ideally.
Yes, that's the goal of all games. Have more fun.
And if you want to have more fun, they have their backer kit live right now. You're still in the first 48 hours, so you can get some free stuff that's going to be available as well. Link in the description down below. Please use our link. It helps us out a little bit financially.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and of course, this was a great excuse to be talking about supers when we got sponsored by Indominant. So thank you, Indominant, for sponsoring and Otis Key Gaming. We appreciate it, and we wish you good luck.
So next one we have on the list is City of Mist, which I do like.
Now, City of Mist, I only bring this up because it was in the comments, but I personally don't think City of Mist is a superhero RPG, but we'll talk about it anyway. So City of Mist is more of a detective noir with superhero elements in the powers that you have. So when you're playing City of Mist, your character has some sort of mythos that encompasses them. And so it's kind of like an alter ego in that sense. And so I can understand people being like, oh yeah, this is like a superhero because there's this identity and this identity. Now, what's interesting is they have different powers that you can then use and utilize depending on that mythos persona. But the mythos persona could be anything. It could be the White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. It could be Captain America himself. It could even be your own personal D&D character. I wish I was joking when I said one of our players actually did that, but they actually did that.
Mine was a leprechaun.
Was it? I forgot if it was. I knew it was luck based.
Yeah, it was leopard. It was a
And
leprechaun.
I think this is to me where like the thing that shines most about City of Mist. It is a rules light game. All you're ultimately doing is adding up the tags, or basically all of these additional items and perks and stuff that can contribute to the scene. You're adding those to your 2d6 die roll, and if you're successful, you're successful. So it's a Powered by the Apocalypse style game. Yeah. But what makes it nice is because it's more rules light. It means you can be really creative with the powers.
Yes.
Which I think is awesome. Like you can have luck, but have it be used in multiple different ways to where like, I think for example, Charles was more about like altering the luck on himself, but you can alter the luck on enemies depending on how you create the power and how you write it. The book gives you like some example powers that you can have, but none of them are concrete. None of them are like the only options you have.
Right.
They're meant to be a little bit more generic so you can use them in multiple circumstances. And I think that's what's really fun because we had Jeffrey was basically Thor. You were basically like luck manipulation to some extent. And then Dunkerton was like gravity, like being able to push and pull people and make you guys fly on a bike at one point.
It was very E.T. It was great.
I think that's what's nice about City of Mist. Customization is like really good. And the downside, obviously, is much like any rules-like game. It's up to the creativity of the players. And especially when we first played it and I was explaining to you guys, like, hey, you're going to come up with your own things. And you were all like,
I'll be honest, yes. Again, I love having freedom. Again, I love having that creative freedom. But sometimes when you're put on the spot, it's like, oh, it's like someone telling you, hey, you're a comedian. Tell me a joke. Right. You're like, or you're a writer. Tell me a story. But yeah, it was interesting. But I definitely, when we got into the swing of it, it became a lot more natural.
Yeah. And again, that's why I only started you off with 4 or with 2, which is half of the 4 tags that you normally have, your power tags. And it was like one was your normal persona and one was your like superpower persona. Right. And obviously it doesn't have to be this way. You could run the game as full like superheroes. The game allows for that. But the game also assumes you're going to be more in a detective noir sense because some of the advice it gives on running a campaign is very much like you're having a mystery that people are trying to solve, and then it leads to the next mystery, which eventually leads to like the big boss that they fight,
right?
Based off of all the clues they've been gathering.
Yeah, because our regular personas, we were all cops or related,
something like that.
Yeah.
Again, I just wanted to mention it because people talked about it, and I do like City of Mist quite a lot. I just argue it's not superheroes, but tell me I'm wrong in the comments. Let us know. You can be wrong by telling me I'm wrong because I'm right.
Our next one is Marvel Multiverse.
Yeah, so this is a cheating one a little bit.
A little bit,
because we did talk about it.
We did.
I made a comment that the biggest issue with the Marvel Multiverse RPG is that the character advancement is terrible because it's only 6 different like tiers, right? And it makes sense because Marvel, you have your street characters, you have like your Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you're like weaker guys, and then you have Silver Surfer and Adam Warlock who can like change, and Wanda, really, like Scarlet Witch, who can change reality to some extent. And it's like, obviously you needed levels of tiers in order to have that. The downside is if you wanted to start at low level and then work your way up, like the advancement wasn't really there. Right. It was hard to like justify being able to have a longer campaign with character advancement rather than just having them stay in like the one tier they're at the entire time, which is where the X-Men expansion comes in because it solves that problem. And it makes sense in theme because the X-Men have their own mansion where they have mutant classes. And so they have levels that you level up in based off of stuff like that, which is really cool. I just liked that they added that in. I liked that. I was like, here's my criticism with the game. And they're like, All right, we already have an issue, like a thing for that.
I do have one question about that though. When it comes to leveling up, what about is it only the X-Men characters? Is it only mutant characters that level up, or can you take a previously existing character like Spider-Man and level them up as well?
Yeah, so basically, Chapter 12 gives you all the new rules. It talks about teams and stuff you can do. It talks about team maneuvers, which I think is really fun. I'm always a fan of when RPGs can allow for synergy between people, because like we were playing D&D the other day, and I remember you guys fighting and being like, man, you guys are not synergizing or communicating, and you still won. And it felt weird, where it's like, in fact, there was a moment where you were actively against doing something. Like you like made a character go prone, which made it harder on the melee guy to actually hit him.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking that through. It was one of the things where it's like, it's supposed to make it easier typically when they're prone, but because of what they were doing, it made it more difficult for them to do it. It was not intentional. Yeah.
So going back to your point, now that I've successfully stalled long enough, basically what's happening is you have schooling advancement chart. So as you're rising through the ranks, you can either increase an ability point or gain a new power, increase an ability point or gain a trait. And so you're just constantly, you're checking all those up. And then once you filled it out, then you advance from rank 2 to rank 3, for example. So yeah, like hypothetically you could have like play Spider-Man in a campaign and have him level up and then gain new powers, which I don't know why you would do that. I would personally want to make my own, but you could.
And that's, you know me, I definitely want to make my own superhero. I want to hang out with I want my hero to hang out with Spider-Man. I don't want to be Spider-Man.
Right.
So
right, but that's the big idea, is that it does give you a little bit more advancement. So you could be like, oh, we ended this session. Everybody, you gain one of these abilities. And it's like, great, cool. Now I get a new power, or now I get a new trait, or now I get a new ability.
So when are we playing that?
Whenever the group decides to not play D&D, which I don't think is happening, but we'll see about that.
I have a plead for my group. Please, can we stop?
So yeah, that's the basic idea there. I just wanted to comment on it before we moved on, because I think that was a really fun thing. But I believe the next two that we're going to talk about are going to be in quick succession because of reasons that I'll explain in a moment.
Our next ones, I guess let's talk about Savage Worlds first.
Yeah, so again, many people, one in particular. Hi, Savage Goose. Hi. Nice to see you again.
I think it's pronounced Savage.
I'm just scared to say the term Savage Worlds too many times because I think he'll magically appear.
I like Beetlejuice.
A little bit, yeah. As long as we don't say it in succession, I guess it doesn't matter. Okay, cool. But basically, when it comes to this RPG, there is a super system, and it's really fun and really cool. The thing is, I ran out of time doing my research and was not able to like fully in depth go into it. But I do hear that the character creation for both Savage World and Champions is some of the most interesting character creation that is out there.
Ooh.
And so obviously that's kind of why I wanted to point those out, because again, we got those comments a lot. We got people saying, what about this? What about that? How dare you not talk about it? And so we wanted to talk about it really quick. We hear the character creation is really fun. I know, Savage Goose. I know. One day we'll actually play it, but that day is not today. It will be a different day.
Yeah, like maybe a Blur's Day.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of talked about all the systems, is there one from this group that kind of catches your eye? And then if you can remember any of the previous ones, which one is like more interesting to you?
Oh, I could never remember the previous one. Again, I told you masks from the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of starting off as a teenager and just like learning your powers, I think it's a really cool concept. You know, who hadn't at a young age imagined getting like, how would your life change if you just started having superpowers?
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you were a teenager, like how crazy is that? We see so many examples of that in media of like, you know, how that happens. Like some people don't handle it as well. Some people handle it really well, maybe too well.
Mm-hmm.
But masks definitely for sure. In this grouping, I'm gonna be a little biased. You know I am. It's got to be Marvel. I'm sorry, make mine Marvel. You know, yeah. I'd be interested in the Savage Worlds and the Champions as well, because I think when it comes to superheroes in general, character creation and customization has to be a top priority. If you can't customize your character, you feel you're kind of pigeonholed into, you know, there's got to be some creativity there. You got to have, you know, some ability where you can change things about your character. You want to make them unique, because again, you don't want to have a Spider-Man clone necessarily. Some people do. Mm-hmm. Again, and I love Spider-Man, but I don't want to be a clone of him, just like what they did with Miles Morales and Spider-Man.
And Ben Riley and Penny Parker and Gwen from an alternate universe.
Peter Parker and Miles Morales. I'm going to go off a little tangent real quickly with that. They have different abilities,
right?
And they came to their powers slightly different too, similar but different. But regardless, they're different just enough where it's like, yeah, we both have spider powers. But, Miles can be stealthy and it can zap people, whereas Peter Parker's got the super strength and the agility, which I guess Miles also has that as well. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think from this group, I really like City of Mist, but again, I argue it's not a superhero one, so it doesn't count. Now, out of all of the ones, Mask is really fun. I really like Sentinels. I just felt like that system was very interesting. Of like, it wasn't just let's create unique characters and like the powers they can have. It was also like how they acted on the battlefield changed. I just liked that you could have different tiers of like, okay, as the battle goes on and I get like more and more damage, I get stronger or I get weaker, and like changes your play style, which I think is really cool. And then also like the whole major and minor twist thing where I could fail something, but if I choose to take a major twist instead, now there's a consequence that's naturally built in, but I still get to succeed. Like we've talked about this before, having mechanics where like you can mitigate dice rolls a little bit, where it's like I am choosing to have this bad thing happen so I can succeed is always a fun thing. So
it's always nice to have that opportunity to change something. Because again, this way, much like our cheating video, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Instead of fudging dice rolls, you can be like, oh, you know what? Because you should never fudge dice roll as a player ever. But instead of feeling the desire to want to, you have an out. You have an ability to do like, oh, I want to change something about this. Something I think also Blades in the Dark, which I haven't played, but I know about the Devil's Bargain, is where you make an agreement with the GM, but you get an extra die because of it.
It's the better version of the Candela mechanic for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like again, going back to Indominant, because we've actually gotten to play it, and it's really fun. Again, we had fun. You guys did well. Hopefully, next time, if we ever play it again, I'm going to have harder to fight enemies because you guys wiped the floor with all of them. Now, granted, I did allow Brooks to do something that he shouldn't have been allowed to do per the rules and also what Zarek said. But I think Rule of Cool can mask some things and do some better stuff. But it was a really fun thing. We do ask that you check out that one shot because it was a lot of fun and a lot of work on our parts, and we just hope more people get to see it. And then you can back Indominant on their Kickstarter, which again, thank you for sponsoring us, Odin's Key Gaming.
And if you're on YouTube and you're watching on YouTube, share it out to people. Share it with your friends, your neighbors, whoever. Let's get Odin's Key Gaming's name out there and us some more subscribers.
And speaking of which, you can join our Discord if you want to just chat with us. We got some fun stuff going on there. We're going to have some polls in there.
Polls?
Because we want to hear from you guys what you guys want to see from us. Yeah. And always our Patreon is available as well, that you can support us financially, and we appreciate it every step of the way.
Yeah, then there's multiple tiers you can check out. Again, if you want to shout out, join the Patreon. We'll shout out you.
Let's end on this very important note. Hot take for superheroes, go.
I don't think gritty realism is all that great.
Interesting. Wow. No, I think it is depending on the situation. My hot take is The Boys sucks, but Invincible is good. And it's really just because The Boys is hard cynicism the entire time. Invincible at least has this like underlying hope. In the end. And like, that's what I like from superheroes is hope.
Well, and I think that's kind of what I was getting at. It's like because that's what Boys, they're hardline gritty realism type stuff. Like if superheroes existed, they'd all be jerks. And again, it points out the flaws and everything. But again, don't mind my characters being flawed, but I like redemption. So need to have the redemption arcs. Yeah,
I would say if you're going to make a superhero RPG, you got to have some merit of hope and like whimsicalness a little bit. Because like, guys, it's one of the silliest things out there.
Right.
Right. And so if you could take it a little too realistically, you do lose me a little bit where it's like, guys, who cares? Like City of Mist is like a noir. So it has some heavy themes, but it's still like lighthearted and whimsical. Like one of the villains can be from Alice in Wonderland. Like it's like you can have very silly things happen. Yeah. So that's just my bit of advice. And I guess also Charles' bit of advice. If you're going to make a superhero RPG, have a little bit of happiness in there. Whimsy. It doesn't have to be like kitty, but just have like some hope in there and it'll be good. Any last bits of things, Charles?
This has been What is Tabletop? Stay witty.
And I've been the villain the whole time.
To no one's surprise.